Okay. Drew, we've just heard from you. Shamubeel, we heard from you in the morning, and Lena, we heard from you in the morning. Sam, we haven't heard from you yet. Now, you know, we've talked a lot about influencers and things. I think you're an influencer without trying to be an influencer. Most people in New Zealand, I think, know you. But I'll just quickly pass to you for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, just to quickly introduce yourself and kind of who you are, just before we get started.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sam. I am one of the founders of Simplicity, which is a non-profit KiwiSaver provider, investment manager, and affordable home builder, and low-cost mortgage provider, and so on. One of 4 founders, and yeah, we've been around for 9 years, and just trying to make our New Zealanders wealthier and do good on the way.
Awesome. We have a lot of Kiwi fund managers in the room, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit that I haven't done anything with my KiwiSaver for like 4 years.
It takes 2 minutes to sum it.
No, I've got a KiwiSaver. I haven't, being self-employed, I haven't put anything in for 4 years.
Actually, I'll tell you what, I'll give you some sun cream here. It says don't get burnt by fees.
Sounds good, I'll keep that. Cool. Before I jump into the Slido, please everybody jump on, ask lots of questions. I'm going to give you time to vote, knowing we don't have a lot of time. I want to make sure we get the right questions out. But first, I'm just going to pose a couple of questions and statements, I guess, to the panel. And I just want you to using your hand, I guess. The higher you raise your hand, the more you agree. Don't raise your hand at all, you strongly disagree. That makes sense? See how that goes? Question number 1.
So talking about future of, I've lost it, I'll talk really loud, teacher voice. Traditional corporate structure, it's back.
Hello. Statement 1, traditional corporate structures will be obsolete within a decade. Interesting, we've got one slightly agree. Do you want to talk a little bit to that, and then we'll pass it on to everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you say obsolete, I think that is changing so much that they're going to take very different forms. Whether it's fully obsolete, that's why it's kind of a half up kind of hand. And I also wanted to create some spice in the panel too. But I think because it's, with a lot of the things that we've heard people speak about today, from AI and various technologies to different approaches and a lot of the data that Shamubeel shared this morning as well, I feel there's so much change happening in our world that there are going to be vastly different types of companies, whether that's the 3-person unicorns, whether that's smaller groups of people managing multiple AI agents. I think there is going to be serious disruption in how work operates.
Anybody else want to comment on your opinion? No, you don't think they're going obsolete?
I mean, obsolete, yeah, that's obviously pretty extreme. I don't know, they're just, corporates are such a beast, man. Like, to unravel and stop the kind of machine of those, I just think 10 years is not, take a lot longer. It's just probably won't put my hand up.
But also, I think from my perspective, the whole purpose of the structure is power dynamics, and that's still a very human construct. And regardless of changes in technology, I think those power dynamics will remain very strong. So we like to have hierarchies. We like to exercise our power. You'll see this all the time in your work, right, Drew? So I think we should be careful in not dreaming of this techno-utopia just because there's technological change. But I suspect what you're saying is that the pace of change is getting faster. So that's what every new technology has done. Progress has always been there, but the pace of progress is speeding up, and that's been the only constant.
Perfect. Statement number 2, and I think I know what the answer is going to be. This is probably going to be less controversial. Organisations that don't take a public stance on social issues will be left behind. I'll repeat that again. Companies or organisations that don't take a public stance on social issues will be left behind. Cool. I'm going to throw it over to you at the end, Sam, and then we'll come back, because I think you'll have a few points on this.
Yeah, I think this generation are much smarter than the previous generation. And I think that what they do with their work and their money is someone they actually care about in a way that we didn't care about, in the past. And I think the interesting thing about AI is, and I know it's AI with everything at the moment, it's this generation's fascination, but the interesting thing about AI is I kind of think of it as a truth machine. So if you have a business which is basically selling bullshit, or if you have a marketing moat where you're really not selling anything which is that useful, I think AI will really cut through that. And I see that in the financial services industry. You know, there are some great product providers here, Kernel Invest Now and Pathfinder and so on. We're selling good products at, well, I still think crazy prices in most cases, but good products. But the majority of our industry actually trades on apathy and ignorance, and they sell very mediocre products at very high prices. You know, KiwiSaver fees alone this year will be $1 billion with no capital required. And AI is actually just going to cut through any marketing campaign, any social media blitzing campaign you may want. It's going to start telling people the truth. And I think it's going to be quite disruptive. So I think that if you are not, as a business, if your consumer cannot identify you with being good for society, it's just going to get harder and harder to justify charging what you do for what you provide.
Very fair. Anybody else want to comment on that?
I think some businesses have been quite burnt recently with taking certain stances, specifically on very like hot button kind of like issues, and especially when it's been quite outside of their wheelhouse, I guess. So I think there's been a bit of a backtracking from some of that recently, whereas I think maybe in the last 5-10 years there's been the sense of going from we've got to comment on everything to actually how do we influence the things in our sphere directly. So I think that's why I didn't put my hand up for that, because I think it really relates to the specific industry you're in. So like with the simplicity in the KiwiSaver space specifically, I think only commenting on the issues that are relevant to your space versus broadly going out and jumping on any kind of social bandwagon at the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some very popular trends over the last, few years, the woke, rhetoric and a little bit to what you said and sort of Sam as well, is I think there was a bit of a drive for companies have got to take this really hard stance and they've got to be seen to be doing something. And I mean, I'm no expert in this, but then I hear the word greenwashing and all these different sort of things where then companies get persecuted for sort of trying to act like they are, but they're not. And I know, I feel like it always, the pendulum swings back, and there's a company I'm working with at the moment, and they're getting really into, they're a construction company, really into environmental, and then we were doing their strategy days, and we just kind of realised they're not an environmental company, and they're doing all the things they need to do and all the compliance with environmental, and we actually kind of took it off the table of having this big banner of where have to do all this drive with environmental, because they're doing the right thing, and I just wonder if, like you said, Sam, if you're doing good work, people are going to know it, AI's going to flesh it out, and maybe it's not about having to take some stance and kind of being seen doing it, it's more, if you're not, it's just going to be really obvious. That's just
Fair enough.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll do one, maybe two more very quickly. Next one, and for anyone wondering, I didn't come up with these statements. This is actually AI statements, so I'm throwing them at you from a computer. Next one, capitalism as it exists today, the way we run corporate capitalism, cannot deliver a sustainable future.
finance guys. I get myself into trouble when I talk about capitalism.
Can I jump in with a comment there?
Please.
I mean, I'm reminded of what Winston Churchill said. He said, capitalism is the worst form of economic organisation, except for all the others. and I've yet to see anything work quite like capitalism. I know it's a dirty word, a nasty word, a pejorative, value-laden word, but goodness gracious me, you're all here, we're all here because of it. You flew on the plane built by capitalists, the chairs, So, I think this concept of capitalism is interesting because people think it as opposed to something else. But actually, if you think about capitalism, it's an incredibly malleable beast. It changes all the time. We've had, oligopolies and monopolies and all this sort of thing, and then it changes and breaks up. The interesting change in capitalism now is that just as the time when we're getting really wealthy, New Zealanders have got KiwiSaver, we're about to go through the best 30 years of our lives probably, because we're about to become a capital-rich country via KiwiSaver, just like the Aussies did in the 1980s. Just as that time is happening, a lot of the businesses that need capital don't need that much. Tech businesses are very low capital businesses. And so what's happening is the rise of social enterprise, whether it is either simplicity Simplicity cost $350,000. And look what it is now. No capital required. It's actually interesting, Maria, if you look at your industry, media, that's become a social enterprise in reverse. It's not becoming a massive profit machine, but it exists to perform a social function, and it needs actually relatively less shareholder capital. So capitalism is changing, but goodness gracious me, don't bet against it. Yeah.
Perfect. I mean, you answered my next question. The follow-up was, what needs to change? What needs to break? Perfect. Cool. I'm going to open up with my first question next, before I jump over, which is, talk about the future of business, future of work. What skill set does the next generation of businesses and business leaders need to have in order to both succeed but also thrive in where the future is going? What does that skill set look and feel like? Anybody just jump in now?
Oh, I feel very strongly about this one. I mean, obvious answer would be AI, which I think has just become normal. But a dying art, which may sound pretty obvious, is the art of talking to people. I think the younger generation living in an entire digital world, you just hear so many stories of can't make eye contact, struggle to talk to people, struggle to talk on the phone. So I'm going to, I'll bang on all day about future generations. I think doubling down on teaching human-centric skills, soft skills, I hate that word, but that's personally what I think is, there's just this real tension or pull away from that, and we're not going to get rid of humans, but we're getting less and less good, that's really bad English, at the human stuff. So I just think that's a really essential part of it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Those core human skills of communication, speaking, engaging with people is just going to be more and more important. I think though adaptability is going to be right up there in terms of being able to respond to, at the moment especially, all the different changes that are coming at us all, left, right and centre. So definitely adaptability, and I would love to see more like resilience and acceptance around failure, especially for those in the kind of startup sector. I think in New Zealand there's still, because we're quite a small nation, there's a bit of a sense of not raising up those kind of people and kind of hating on people if they, fail. So I think definitely more of I'd like to see more supportive, more support for our entrepreneurs and people starting new things.
Cool. I'm going to jump over to Slido now and start rattling through some of these questions. I think it would be rude for me not to start with the economist in the room for this question, so we'll start with you, Shamubeel.
Sure.
What key economic indicators do you believe will most influence business growth over the next 5 years?
Knowing your customers. So I think people get obsessed about economic growth in the aggregate, but even in a recession, you have businesses that succeed. And businesses succeed because they can reach their customers and they know their customers. So nothing really changes. Good business is just good business because they meet the needs of their customers and can relate to them. And that requires good leaders, and good leaders are people who have curiosity and humility. Those are the two key characteristics. So look, I don't think you need to look at some kind of magic metric. There is no such thing. It's about knowing what your customers need and want and make sure you're ready to give it to them when you're there.
Perfect. I'm just going to follow you up on that question. So you mentioned, good leaders, curiosity and humanity is what's going to take us forward. What role, where does that sit when we look at all the technology, like all of these ChatGPTs and things that are coming through, which is removing some of that, in my eyes anyway, some of that humanity, that connection, that stuff that, I'm just going online, quickly tell me what the answer is, move on.
Well, I disagree. I think the whole purpose of general purpose technologies, which artificial intelligence is, it multiplies what you are. It's a multiplying force. So if you're a shit human, you'll become 5 times more of a shit human as a result of the technology they use. But a good quality human with lots of curiosity, lots of humility, and leadership qualities, I think those people will amplify and multiply those skills. So no technology is inherently good or inherently bad. It's about what is it that it amplifies, speeds up, makes better, bigger, whatever. So I have a very strong view. Like if you look at the history of technology, we've talked about humans are going to have so much spare time. Remember I wish we've been talking about we're going to have nothing to do because of technology for generations, and it's just not happening. So my sense is that when it comes to all of these kinds of things, we just need to think about what is it that we're actually trying to use this stuff for, and it amplifies who we are as people. So it still goes back to those core qualities of what a good person is and a good leader is. I don't think that changes at all. But the gap becomes much more visible.
Nice, nice. Next one, Drew, we're going to start with you. Then I'm interested in this and going down the cycle and kind of seeing what everybody says here. You just mentioned obviously stress and disconnection has been rising over the last few years and more so over the last kind of few months. What role should tech play in the well-being of both us as individuals, but also the well-being of business?
Really, just say that last question again. What?
So if stress and disconnection are rising, which we've seen it is, what role should tech play in the well-being of both us as individuals, but also potentially the role of well-being for businesses?
I'll start with the business side. I can't, I mean, it's a bit utopic, but I think if business owners and employers should invest in teaching their employees how to use technology in ways that actually help them in their lives outside of the office. I was even chatting to people earlier about having things where you might have everyone comes in and shares things they're doing with it in their lives that are helping them eat better or exercise better and things like that. So I think, like not just having it be helping them at work, but how could it help them outside of work? Instead of when there are productivity gains or time gains, then just loading up more onto the people, actually allowing that to have space so they can strategize and think more and bring more high value. And then lastly, with sort of healthcare, I do think things like counselling, therapy, doctors, general practitioners, I've worked with them for many years. I really think it could revolutionise that sort of whole healthcare industry where we're, like, say, 70 to 80% of the general work that's needed to get done for someone around a health issue, like a psychologist having to spend 3 or 4 sessions just getting to know someone, when they probably ask the person the same questions, and then finally around the 5th session they might be able to get deep and use their specialised knowledge. So I think, using technology to, like you said, amplify the human and have them be able to provide the value and not spend so much time on stuff that's just not very high value.
Cool. Anybody else touching on that one or keep moving?
Yeah, this is one problem I think technology maybe is the best place to solve. I think, especially in relation to stress and disconnection, I think, especially when you look at things like, the adoption of smartphones and Instagram, I think it's caused a massive spike, especially in young people, around anxiety and disconnection. And yes, while there is potentially some ways that technology can help with connecting, like the access, I think in terms of there's a role to play around getting access to services, but I can't remember who said before about sometimes you just need to go out and touch grass and like get away from, yes. So I think, and especially in relation to stress and those kind of attributes, I don't think technology's got great options there. I think from a business sense, sure, in terms of efficiency, in terms of productivity, new ideas, but in terms of that personal stress and those elements, I think it's much more connecting with loved ones and friends and family and spending time in nature. It's getting the heck away from screens for a while.
Can I be the curmudgeonly old fart in the room on this one? Because I don't believe it. I don't believe that this generation is any more stressed than previous generations. I just believe that we talk about it more, we acknowledge it more, we speak to therapists more, and we will no doubt speak to, use AI as a tool. Every generation's stressed. And previous generations were stressed about not having enough food on the table, or about never seeing their kids because they're down the mine six days a week. So I think that we can talk ourselves into this existential crisis of society, but actually I should be very positive about it. We're talking about it. People didn't even used to, particularly men, toughen up and all that bullshit that I was taught when I was a kid. So I don't think we're in this problem. I think we have some very creative solutions now that we are open to being the dialogue with it. But be careful what you wish for, because on one hand, if you want people to be talking to their therapist all the time, and on the other hand, you want them to be more resilient. pretty tough doing both of those things, right? So we're going to have a challenge as a society and a generation in this area, but I don't think we should sort of talk ourselves into a crisis which may not actually exist, and rather spend more time on the solutions that are out there.
Can I disagree with my boss?
You sure can.
You somebody get the camera from here.
That's why I hired you, buddy.
Well, we have seen a rise of loneliness in New Zealand and in other places. So what we have seen is, you're right, there are lots of good things that have happened, but also we've seen a breakdown in some of the social institutions and connections and places of meeting. So I think there is an issue there. So the antidote to the technology and some of the stresses that we see today, they were previously offset by having churches, sport groups, village squares that people hung out in. And those human connections, those positive contacts were hugely positive. So my sense is that, to your original question as well, is the answer to all of this is, how do we find opportunities to have more of these kinds of positive engagements, person to person, spending time together, having conversation, because those are really powerful things. That's what sort of knits us together as communities, and communities where the strength is. You mentioned, Lena, around the friends, family, and community, right? Those are the things that are fundamentally the things that give us satisfaction and resilience. That's what resilience looks like, not being a tough bitch, right?
You've changed my mind, boss.
Cool. And I'm a yes and with what you said, Sam, because the previous generations, stress is, like I said, just the load upon us at any one time of the fluctuating stress hormones in our body. It's a physiological thing, not so much how we feel. But I think the gaps between it, sort of what you talk about, is probably the difference. We're so connected all the time. And if you're looking into it, there's some neuroscientists have looked at when you're on a Teams call, and say I'm having a very intimate conversation with you, and we're bonding, naturally my oxytocin will rise, and so will yours, which is the happy bonding molecule and different happy hormones. On a two-dimensional screen, it's less. And so in a digital world, you literally cannot recreate the same fluctuation of the sort of happy hormones in a two-dimensional screen. So I think things like that have changed. So there's just way less of those sorts of connections. And so I think it's just become so much more vast, the load of stressors on us. Maybe not the same drastic level of hunger and things like that, but I think it's just the always on, and then not having those gaps and that downtime. And back in the day when I was a kid, if I wasn't home and someone rang the phone, the phone at home, they had to come around my house and knock on the door. Whereas if you think about life now, how many of you, if you're like me and you see a little red thing on your text message, can't deal with not responding? Yeah, I mean, that's a fundamental difference.
But funny you say, people that come knock at your door, us Gen Zs, millennials, we won't even pick up a phone these days.
Exactly.
I don't want to talk to you, I'll text you, because it's scary.
And then remember call waiting. How annoying was that when your sister or whatever was on the phone with their boyfriend and no one could call in?
Fair enough. I'm a big believer in looking at the past for the future, right? So analysing what we did in the past and where that can take us in the future. And I just want to, it sparked a thought in my mind when you mentioned that whole loneliness epidemic that we've got going on. If we look back sort of 30 years ago, workplaces and businesses were there to provide an income for a person, and they didn't really care about your personal life, right? It was, you leave that at the door, you're here to do work, I don't really care about what's going on at home. Then we sort of had, I guess, what I'll call the Google effect, right? Where workplaces became places people lived and breathed and did their washing and took their pets and had healthcare and all these things, and there was almost an obligation for businesses to provide more than just a job and an income. What does the next 20, 30 years look like to you? Are we going backwards? Are we going further? Are we stagnating with that? What does the future of a workplace look like to you in sort of 20 years from now?
Look, I think it's very clear to me anyway that a lot of more will be automated, but the fewer maybe human beings you have there, it'll be way more important that they are the highest quality. They will actually be the differentiator. The AI stuff will be a commodity in the sense that a robot is a commodity in a car factory. It's always the humans that have made the difference in automation, and it always will be in the future of the workplace. So from our point of view, we love our employees. We even allow them to disagree with the boss.
Ordinary public, right, sir?
Well, the Red we won't agree on much last night either. But and so that means you choose the very best, and you wrap them up in love and attention and empathy and communication, and they will do miracles for you. I think so. I think that's the future. We're already on that train, and that train's just going to carry on. So the higher quality individuals will differentiate themselves. I mean, the future of work is extremely good if you want to work. Yeah.
Can I just add a bit of nuance to that? So most of the trends in that kind of broad sweep of history of work has been towards hollowing out of the middle type jobs where you need fewer qualifications but still get good incomes and good security. So we're kind of getting this barbell effect of the superstars that Sam talked about, but also people who are paid really low wages, have really precarious work, and are essentially quite exploited, right? So I think where technology is going is creating more of this barbell effect of there will actually be more jobs in the future. That's what technology's history has been, but we're probably going to see a lot of growth in those very high quality jobs and a lot of really low quality jobs. And therein lies, I think, some of the risk of that big divide opening up.
Awesome. And a follow-up question to that from Slido, and I'm sure all of you will have some input on this, but what psychological factors drive both customer and employee loyalty? And how can businesses better leverage those in the future? Maybe Lena, you might be able to start on that one.
Yeah, I think it's definitely that deep understanding of either party, whether it's from deeply understanding your customers or understanding the motivations and the desires of your employees. Like, what are they there for? What do they really want? What drives and motivates them? So I think in both cases, it's really understanding and having that empathy and responding to that as that changes over time. In both of those cases, yeah.
I typically sort of look at an organisation or an enterprise as just a, independent of the service or product, like just a collection of people and a kind of a whole organism. And what it is to be human is to sort of be goal-oriented, object-related, and always seeking sort of meaningful purpose. And ultimately, we need something to do. And you find when people aren't in meaningful activity or they're not doing much. I deal with sometimes retired people who are miserable. They should have the best life, but they've got no meaning. And I think one of the most important things with a company is that feeling part of a community, a bit like what you said, but it's kind of cliche, but the career side of it, but not just career, but actually, am I developing myself? Do I feel like I'm moving forward? And do I feel like my company values the direction I'm going? And if there's time taken to figure out someone's skill sets or what their skill sets could be, like that time taken, I just find that makes a huge difference in people's worth and then their feeling of purpose and their willingness to stick around.
I've had hundreds of startup companies through my office, and the one question that I think really differentiates whether they'll succeed or not is, what is the problem you are trying to solve? And so what is your customer's problem? Where is the hole? And unless you can answer that question very emphatically, in a way that the customer would agree with, you're probably not going to succeed. And I think that in a technology world now, which makes consumers smart, AI is going to make them incredibly smart. And so they're only going to be buying services and products where it's actually fulfilling a genuine need. And I think most startup companies, and a lot of existing companies, by the way, do not ask that question of themselves. You've got to go for growth, you've got to go for more profit and whatever, but what is it that what is it the customer really wants?
Yeah. Nice. We just had a question pop through quite quickly here, and I think it relates nicely both for the future of work, but also something, Shamubeel, you touched on in your talk earlier this morning with our ageing population and the fact that we're losing more of our younger workforce. And obviously there's quite a debate at the moment in the political sphere around age of retirement and when superannuation comes in and things like that. And I don't want you to get political if you don't want to, so please don't.
Not too political.
Question here is, should people work to the age of 65 in the future? My question to you, adapting it slightly, is just, what does that future of retirement look like, and is that realistic for people in my generation, for example?
Yeah, I think there are two ways of looking at it. One is, do you have to work, or do you want to work? So we have seen lots of people in older ages continue to work because they can, or because they have to, because they don't have enough money. So having the situation where you are working because of poverty is a problem, but you're working because you're still healthy, still capable, still have a lot to give and contribute. That's awesome, right? You should not be spending 20 odd years of your life just doing nothing if you want to do something, right? So even with technology, I don't think the human lifespan has just increased so much, right? What's the median life expectancy for a woman now? 87, 80 something like that. It's an extraordinary lifespan, right? Are we really saying that for 20 of those years, you should just check yourself out, even though you want to contribute? So with technology, I think that some of the opportunities will be, as we get older, as some of those physical limitations come in, technology can augment and allow you to work. But I'd also like to have a welfare system that's able to look after people who can't work in those older ages, because that's
And you know, what's work and what's leisure? You know, if you're working for purpose, it doesn't feel like work, whether you get paid or not, right? So I think we've got this artificial distinction between working and not working, bad and good.
Yeah.
But you know, we now live a blended life. You try telling me you go on holiday and don't check out social media 10 times a day, right, at work. I don't have holidays anymore. I say I have wallidays. I work for 2 or 3 hours a day and the rest of it's off, and isn't that bloody marvellous? Lucky me, right? So, I don't know, have we got this old-fashioned idea? Are we demonising work? Shouldn't we be not talking about work, just talk about purpose, a life with purpose?
And of course, for a lot of older people, their engagement in community is sometimes not through paid employment, but through volunteering and community organizations and those other things. So there's value in unpaid work as well. And I think it's fine for having all of those things, but it's about making sure we give people choices. And I think that's the big part, is whether it's through technology or through public policy, we want to ensure that people have good choices in front of them, and we're not forcing them to have a quality of life that is poor.
Sorry, can I jump in? One more quick thing too, because a whole lot of young people are entrepreneurs. Can I just give you a piece of advice? Stop worshipping youth. The money's with the old fellas. Start designing. Our most successful private company investment makes food for people who can't swallow because they're so old. Start thinking about that as your... Oh, Ralphie, you're right at the back there. Start thinking about that as your demographic, because not only is it growing, right, Shamubeel, the older number, great number of people, that is where the money is. And that is where they need, that is where there's genuine need for the problems that they have as a consequence of getting old. It's beautiful. That's where the best, the best and brightest entrepreneurs should be diving into this sector, because it's the area of greatest need. And I tell you, 1 out of every 10 companies I see coming through out even thinks about people over 50. We're all worshipping youth.
Because it's sexy, that's why.
Yeah.
Some silver foxes in the room.
The other thing to just chuck in is, I mean, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but there's a lot of work being done to have us live a hell of a lot longer, and there's, mad scientists and things working on how to, 3D print hearts and all sorts of, kind of transhumanistic stuff. So, I don't know, I mean, are we going to live to 100 soon, or 150? And I suppose that throws another thing in as well, could quality of life keep going? And so therefore, to your answer of 65, maybe 85 will be the kind of norm, because 85 will be the new 60, so 85 will be the new 65.
Which would be great for those people who have found their passion, but for those who hate what they do, another 20 years working, that's going to suck. Awesome, we have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to give you all, I'm going to avoid the organisers looking at me and give you all 2 minutes for this question, so we will run slightly over. In 2 minutes, I just want to hear from each of you what you're most excited for in New Zealand over the next 30 years in terms of business, and what you're most worried about over the next 30 years. So most looking forward to and most worried about. And we'll start at the other end. We'll start with Silver Fox.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just want to spend the first 10 seconds. Guys, I wanted to get all of our karmic energy together and send it over to Drew's mum right now, okay? So she gets better. Look, the next 30 years are going to be the best in New Zealand's history. I don't even think it, I know it, because we're about to save something like it. Shamubeel had the numbers, $6.6 trillion of our own money, and if we invested 30% of that in New Zealand like we do now, that's $2 trillion invested in New Zealand, right, in the next 30 years. That's every hospital, every road, every school, every infrastructure gap we need. There's a rising tide of money arriving, right? That is opportunity. So that's what excites me. What really scares me is that right now KiwiSaver managers are investing less and less and less money in New Zealand because there's nothing to buy. You know, the venture capital industry is already awash with money. Private equities already have enough money. The only thing that can absorb that sort of money is infrastructure and housing. And we don't have the solutions to absorb billions of dollars in infrastructure right now. So, you know, that's why Shamubeel and I are pounding on the beehive right now and saying, how do we get KiwiSaver money in to build the infrastructure that we need, which supports the industries and the businesses that you want, right, to build. So it's an incredible, like never in our history have we seen the amount of money about to be invested in New Zealand, and we're right at the coalface, right? Every single day we have somewhere around $5-7 million, tick, 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 comes in, we have to invest it. It's awesome. When your parents had the jiggy jiggy, and you came out, you had no idea how lucky you were. This is the best time in New Zealand's history to ever be alive. Here.
None of us wanted the mental image.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about just the talent in New Zealand. I know there's a lot of bad press at the moment about so many Kiwis going overseas, going abroad, but I think the combination of AI and the unique kind of sets of talent that we have in New Zealand, and soon with this additional capital that we've got coming and different things, I think there's going to be that kind of next wave of great Kiwi companies, the likes of the kind of zeros that really created, and I am one of those who benefited growing up through a company like that, learning a lot of those kind of skills and thinking global from day one. So very much approaching business as, yes, the New Zealand market is a great one to test in, but you know, thinking straight to how do we export this, how do we think about international markets. The thing that worries me is if we still get stuck in this kind of trading houses with one another space and this kind of obsession with, especially from a policy perspective, making like that as a way to invest and grow, like making that much less risky at the moment. Like that feels like the default still for so many people. Now sitting on a board and seeing kind of how much risk you do take on as when you are starting a company, and if it goes wrong, that kind of you know, how liable you are for so many things. So I think change around that, both from a policy perspective to incentivize and de-risk entrepreneurs, will be really key. So that's my concern, that doesn't happen.
The thing that makes me really optimistic is just the sheer scale of human innovation that we're experiencing in almost every field when it comes to science, material sciences, biology, medicine. It's extraordinary. It's well beyond AI, right? And that really makes me optimistic because we are learning faster and we're making it applicable faster than ever before. What worries me is probably something we talked about this morning, which is around fraying social cohesion in New Zealand and in other countries. That loss of trust in each other, the loss of connection in each other really worries me because we will not be able to have a good society. We will not be able to take advantage of these technologies if we don't do it together. And that is probably the thing that worries me the most is we can't have good politics, we can't have good policies, and we can't have trust if we don't know each other.
See why we hired him?
Yeah, I do. I really do, because I'm going to basically say what you just said in a different way. Well, I'm actually more excited now than when you asked the question, because Sam, actually, you know, I'm not a finance guy or anything like that, and so that sounds like a fact. That does excite me, because all the housing stuff is a problem. You know, especially in New Zealand, what excites me is we're such a remote country, but so modern, and with all the technology coming in and sort of the healthcare system not being so great, I just think things can improve here so much, and we only have one government to deal with. Like, I've lived in the US, I've lived in the UK and Australia, And we don't deal with state governments or federal governments. And I know we've got our issues, but I laugh when people get so upset about, New Zealand politics. And if you live in America, it's just like, it's just next level. Like, everyone has to choose a side. Whereas, who was it saying earlier? Like, we're so far left, even our right is left. So I just think we've got such a cool opportunity for New Zealand to keep punching way above its weight and do some cool things. And then, similar to what you said, but I do have a little concern. I don't know what the consequence of this entire digital medium is going to play out as, because there's been an entire generation now that have kind of had whole parts of their brain not developed in ways that, many of us who are slightly older did get developed. And when we were in the playground and, you were mean to me and I didn't like what you said, we just have to figure it out.
But did you notice Drew looked at me when he said old?
You're probably younger than me, dude. At least you've got that classic, Asian complexion, because you never know how old you are. But yeah, I do. That people talk about kids being a little bit less resilient, but I think there's an aspect of it. I just worry that they just have not had certain skill, or biology that got created. So, but maybe it'll just be different because the previous generation than us had different things. So just a little bit of a weariness there. In 10 years' time, I'm going to be able to tell what happened because everyone was so in their screens and their phones.
And in 10, 20 years, I'll get to be Sam on the other side going, you had it easy. And on that note, I just had to get away from the parents doing the shingy thing.
Jiggy.
Jiggy, that's it.
I'm going to use that same.
That's us, that's our panel. Thank you guys very, very much. I know it's been a very long day. I think we're almost done.